Well, here it is, 41 years after we met Kerry Moore. Isn't that something?
It's amazing. 41 years is a long time, Megan.
Yes, a lot of changes, a lot of wonderful memories. And you've retired, and I'm still working, and that's not fair.
Well, listen, you're still a few years younger than I am.
Kerry Moore came here in the fall of the late summer of 1960 as it was an English teacher mostly, wasn't it? But it was the speech teacher.
Yes, I think I had 2 speech classes, and I believe about 3 Anyway, I taught American history. I know that the first year. I didn't teach English the first year. The first year I didn't. It was all speech and American history.
And do you remember who you followed as the speech teacher? And I really wouldn't call it a drama coach at that time, would you? It was really the speech teacher.
Probably. I never met the man, but they said his name was Dwayne Reeves.
And everybody was devastated that Mr. Reeves had moved. He was wonderful. They had no idea what they were getting. He went to Lubbock High School, and he had had some real good successes with one-act plays. Do you remember the very first play that you ever directed at Muleshoe High School?
Yes, it was Every Family Has One. I believe that's the name of it. And I think you were in it also.
Yes, and I know what everyone had. Every family had a
it had a skeleton in the closet.
That's right. It was a comedy.
Yes, it was.
And it was more than a comedy on Muleshoe High School stage.
It was. It was the first play that I'd ever directed in my life away from one of my professors. And I don't know whether you say it was good or, for me, it was probably good. But for looking back at it, it was just awful.
It was.
It was.
I'll have to tell too. First of all, do you remember, Kerry, you really, didn't say, now you have to have your lines memorized by a certain date. You were just, oh, we'll get it done, Well, we didn't get it done.
No, people were still having scripts on the stage and hidden under tables and chairs and so on.
I remember this one actress named Megan Lamb. I knew her vaguely.
Yes.
She walks over to the side of the stage and she said, in case you didn't know, we don't know our lines.
Well, I'm glad I don't remember that.
Oh, Kerry, it was a catastrophe. And the very last play you directed at Muleshoe High School was what?
Oh, it was Hamlet. This pad to just finish that up in May.
That was the one-act play, and it was much better than everyone family has.
Oh, I think so. Much better. I always think back. I wish that when I first started teaching school, I had as much knowledge about directing plays and speech as I did when I first started. The students would have gotten so much more out of it. But I was just such a, just one of those greenhorns that knew little or nothing.
Kerry, you had been a speech major, was it, at WT?
Yes, I got my speech and theater both major at WT, and also an English major, and then I had a history minor.
So the seniors, of whom I was one, and you as the teacher were just 4 years apart in age.
That's right.
You had just come out of college at WT, and you graduated from high school.
At Memphis High School.
Now, your mother and father, your dad is now deceased. What's his name?
His name was Ulysses Moore.
And what did Ulysses do?
He worked for Alice Chalmer with the implement company there in Memphis.
Kerry, did you grow up with brothers and sisters?
I had one sister, and she was a year younger than I am, and she died in 1980 with cancer.
And your mother, is she still alive?
She's still living. She's still living in Memphis.
And what is her name?
Her name is Roberta.
And I know she's been so proud of you over all these years.
Well, she always is beaming for some reason.
And tell me about what was her occupation.
Well, she worked out on the farm in the ranch when I was, and a housewife when I was growing up, and then when after my sister and I got into high school, she went into nursing, and she was in nursing. Well, she's probably for 15 or 20 years.
Where did you find the love of expression and drama and the theater and sharing with your students, just learning how to speak correctly?
Well, that's something I guess when you have to get into the business, you just have to do the best you can. And I guess it's from my high school teacher, Dr. Guthrie, that I had when I was in high school and also when I was in college. I mean, those are things that you learn, but and also just talking to people and listening to the critics and what they have to say about your plays.
Were there any teachers in elementary or junior high, high school years in your public school education that really gave you the love to want to teach?
Oh, yes, that was Mrs. Guthrie, the one I mentioned. Yes, she definitely was.
And she was your high school?
She was my high school English teacher, junior and senior English. And also she taught me, and I was also in the plays, and she directed the plays, and she was a speech person in theater.
Now, what I've always felt like that you and Shakespeare must have known each other in years gone by.
Well, I've always enjoyed doing Shakespearean plays because, to me, I guess I've studied them so much, through English and of course the courses that I've taken throughout the years. To me, they're easier. They're an easier play to direct a lot of times than these contemporary plays that you have.
Oh, the contemporary plays are so, I get lost sometimes.
Sometimes you do because of the storylines that you have with them. And I just enjoy the Shakespearean plays. And Shakespeare plays are easy to cut down because he repeats so many times, so the audience will remember it.
And when was the first time, or can you remember the first time that you were introduced to Shakespeare?
Well, the first Shakespearean play that I ever directed, I believe, was in 1965, I believe, and it was Twelfth Night. I believe that was when it was.
69. So who were...
So, 65.
65. Who were some of the actors and actresses?
I know that Dwayne Calvert was in that play, and I was just trying to, just trying to remember all of the kids right now. It's hard because I'd have to go back and look in the annuals and say, oh, I don't know why I'm forgetting those students. But after 41 years and all, it's hard to remember everyone.
What about the years that you had musicals? Were there 4 years or 3?
Let's see. The first year that we did a musical, we did The Wizard of Oz, and Paul Durham and I did.
He's the choir director.
He was the choir director, and by the way, Paul and his wife Pat came by and visited with us. I believe it was Monday. It was Monday. This past Monday, they came by and visited, and they live out in California. They live in the San Bernardino area, and they were here visiting. Paul's parents live in Lubbock, and they're moving them to one of the retirement centers there in Lubbock. And Paul and I directed The Wizard of Oz, and I know Stanley Black and all that group of kids were in it. I believe Winston Harrison, that group, they were just wonderful, and it was a good show. And then the next year, Bill Bradley came in, and we started off with the Music Man.
Now, Bill was in the band.
Yes, he was a band director, and he loved those things. And
has Bill died?
Yes, he did. I think it was about 85. He died in Big Spring with a heart attack, just instant.
Now, can you remember in that second, the Music Man, anybody specific?
Oh, goodness. In the Music Man, we had people like Bill Harbin was in that one, and he played the Music Man. And then Jane Branscombe played, I believe, Marion the Librarian. And of course, you had John Gully in that one, and we had Dr. Purdy that was in the play, played the mean little boy that was throwing the firecracker under Eulalie McKechnie's shin. Did Nonette Bovell play that part? I can't remember, but I don't remember what year I can't remember. But anyway, it was a fun show. I just love the Music Man. It's just a good show.
I can remember Martha McCormick bringing, I don't know if it was her daughter or her son or both.
It was Tim.
And Tim didn't want to be there. And she wanted Tim to be there. And I couldn't understand. I thought, Mrs. McCormick, just let him go home. He doesn't want to. And then after I became a mother, I understood.
And Tim ended up doing a great job in that show.
Isn't that something? Mother knew this.
That's right.
And after the Music Man,
I believe the next year that we did, I believe it's The King and I, the one with Gary Edwards. Gary Edwards played the king and shaved his head, and then we had, I believe, Jane Branscombe again played the lead lady part in that one, and
Renee
Anderson and Cheryl Mason. I can't remember Cheryl's last name now. Sullivan. Those girls were all in it, and so we had such a good time with all those. And of course, John Gully was in that one, and we just had a good time.
And have you taught with any other of your former pupils besides John Gully?
Oh, goodness. In the high school right now, well, of course, Lola Pilot retired last year, and I taught with Lola. And Linnell Skaggs, I've taught with Linnell. And then down through the years, of course, John, I've taught with him. But there are other, my mind will come back in a few minutes, and I'll tell you the others that I've taught with throughout the years. But I've taught with probably 7 or 8 of my former students.
Have you had 3 generations of any family? Probably.
Megan, I may have, but I don't know. I know I've had a lot. I know I've had a lot of the children that come through, and I imagine I may have with some of them, but I just don't know. That's something that I tried to keep up with, but it's hard because they change the names going down the line and so on. And some of the kids will in there say, "Do you remember my daddy?" and so on. And I'll say, and then all of a sudden, "Oh yes, I remember." I remember him then after they remind me about something. And of course, a lot of times the kids say, "Well, how's my daddy in class?" And that's always great, because things that about what their parents have done in the past and so on. You're not about to say a word.
Thank you.
Never, because you don't do that.
Now, was there another musical?
Oh yes, we did. After that musical, I believe we did the music Wizard of Oz, the Music Man. We did the Sound. The King and I. We did the Sound of Music. And by the way, Dr. Purdy, he was also the lead in The Sound of Music. And so, and I believe Jane had, I believe they were seniors that year, it may have been, and and Jane had the role there.
Jane Branscombe.
Branscombe. And then we have, I was trying to remember, there's so many that were in that. And
those are big casts.
Oh, listen, every one of all the casts that we had, probably anywhere from, I would say from 80 to 140 were in those casts. And when you had to have that many, of course, when you're looking at, you had Mrs. Black as the art director to help with all that. And Ms. Black, and by the way, she's over at Panhandle with Beth, who is the Mother Superior of the retirement home, the convent over there. So I will go through there once in a while. I'd say I'm going to stop and visit, but I haven't yet. And then we had Bill Bradley, the band director, took care of all the orchestra, and Liesl Richardson took care of all the choreography and sound, and Bob Breckenridge helped us, and his wife helped us. So goodness gracious, we just had a whole group of people.
And you had a complete orchestra, too.
Yes, we did. Bill always had between 24 to 30 in his orchestra, and they would all start with, what we would do is we'd cast the play, we'd cast the musical probably in the last of May or the 1st of June, and the kids would have everything memorized when school started. Liesl would work with all the choreography and all of the choreography and the voices until marching season was over with, and I'd work with all the scenes and acting. So soon as the marching season was over with, we went right straight into rehearsals with the orchestra when Bill got through, and it was incredible how good truly they're the best high school musicals I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that because I was part of it, but they really were. And then we also did after the Sound of Music, we did Oklahoma. And Cheryl and Renee and Leland Ferris and Stephen Woodard and all, and go back and one of the other boys that's in that one, his daddy was a contractor here in town.
It's
Ford.
Yeah.
Yes.
Miss E.T. Ford.
Yes, and they're just, those kids were absolutely incredible. As I go back, and I have a tape of that musical, and I have looked at it, and it is some of the finest acting I have ever seen in a musical.
Is that Oklahoma?
That's Oklahoma. I have never seen the dance. The scene where it's the murder scene, and they do it in a ballet in the slow motion, the way Liesl has it done. It's some of the most beautiful work I have ever seen on the stage.
Now, what about Liesl? He was the choir director. What happened?
Liesl passed away. He did about 10 years ago. About 10 or 11 years ago, he passed away.
I did not know. Oh, he was young.
He was a young man when he died, and he may have been longer than that, but at least 10 or 11 years ago.
I didn't know that. Well, I remember that, and not maybe in all of them, but in most of them, Susan Birdsong was the pianist.
Yes, she was. She was a pianist, and she was such a wonderful pianist and so on. And I got a good letter from her and Nikki just this past week.
And what Susan, I thought, was so professional as a child.
Oh, listen, she is just incredible. She's one of she truly, when you go back and look at someone to work with as a pianist and someone just to visit and be around and so on, she was just great. I just love Susan. Just super person.
Of course, speaking of love, the true love came from her mother, Polly, who loved you. You could do no wrong. Do you remember that, Kerry?
Oh, I remember that. But, the thing of it is about it, too, I just love Dr. Birdsong. And now we could get along. We could sit out at night, and just sit out on the bench and just talk and visit away. And, when you go to his office to see, he just let you do the talking and never say a word when you went down to. But, again, when you just by himself, you could just sit and visit, and he's the most wonderful and gracious person.
My dad said, and anybody who knew the Birdsongs will understand it, he said, that is one of the finest men that God ever created. And I said, well, Daddy, why do you say that? And he said, do you realize that he listens to Polly all day? And he listens and he eats her food, and it's just fine. And it wasn't just fine.
Well, at times it wasn't. I know we've laughed about it at times when she'd have to go get up from the table or something. But and she was so gracious. But when when you would go over there, it was like a conveyor belt of food at her house, and she'd just feed you continuously. Why, goodness gracious, I've never seen such.
She loved Kerry Moore, and she loved my boys. Oh, and she'd talk and talk, but Dear was wonderful.
Oh, he was.
She did name him correctly, Dear. He was a dear.
Oh, he wasn't. There's no doubt about it. It's always interesting. When he'd come home, nobody ever answered, ever picked up the telephone or ever answered. And, she'd get on the telephone and talk for hours. But when Dr. Birdsong walked in the house, that was the end of anyone talking on it. And he had a telephone in every room, outside, everywhere.
Long cords. Yes. And the first bathroom telephone I ever saw was at Dr. Birdsong's house. Well, I moved 3 times, Kerry, and they were my neighbors the first 3 times I moved in Muleshoe. So
it is interesting.
And we Polly Wally Doodle all the day is what Daddy used to say.
But the most fun thing about Mrs. Birdsong is that you could be just talking away and say, "Come on." Just go, goodbye. Just slam the telephone down and go. The first 2 or 3 times it'll shock you, but then after you get to know her, I mean, you expect it.
Oh, we could write a book or especially a play, and it wouldn't be a one-act play.
No, we'd have more fun. And listen, at her age, though, she could play ping pong. Oh, she was a superb ping pong player.
Now, on the one-act plays, the first one, do you remember the first one?
I believe it was about something about Good Morning in the Morning with Lucille or something like that.
Song of Louisa.
In the morning. Mm-hmm.
Had how many characters?
Probably about 4 characters, 3 or 4 characters.
3.
Mm-hmm.
3.
You and Jared Coulter, and I don't remember who.
Nonnie Taylor.
Nonnie Taylor, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know if we had a stage crew. I know there was no one who did sound.
Probably not, because I was so lunchy and dumb in those days. I probably didn't think it.
Now, Kerry, it was good. Now I remember that.
It was a good. I enjoyed the show because the 3. I mean, when you just start out with something, Kathy Phillips, the band director, she always told me one thing. She said, if I have a band and she said if they can play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and they can play it to the very best. She said, that's what I'm going to take to contest because you're going to get a 1 on it. And she told me, she said, when you choose a play for the very first time, don't you dare have a large cast. She said, you have 3 or 4 or 5 kids in there, and that's all.
Now, was she the band director when you came, Kathy?
She and I came the same year.
Oh, did you?
Mm-hmm. And she was my high school band director. At Memphis, Texas. Now, she spent 4 years at Memphis. Then she went to Guam for the military while I was in for about 2 years while I was in college, and then she came here the same year I did.
And she was really loved.
Oh yes, and she was a band director. She directed bands for 8 years because when she left here, she retired because of those migraine headaches, and she won 8 sweepstakes, 8 out of 8. She was dedicated.
And she wrote the fight song for Muleshoe.
Yes, she did. She wrote the Muleshoe High School fight song.
Do you remember what year she might have?
She did that the second year she was here.
The second year. So about 62 or something.
Yeah, let's see. We had 60, 61. So we started using that fight song in the fall of 61.
Mm-hmm. And it'll stay forever.
I guess so. It'll stay because I've been here all the time. I've been here for 40. That'd be 40 years. That because the first year.
Now, Kerry, tell me. Pardon me, Dr. Moore. Whatever.
Oh, good grief! Don't worry about that.
What about the one-act plays? The first one that you took to state. What year was that, and what was it?
The first play I took to state was in 1975, and it was A Gap in Generations. And it was a comedy. It is a commedia show. It's one of the Italian commedia comedies, and it was just a hoot. And in that show, I can remember some. I hope I can remember all the characters. I had Bill Durham in that play. I had Jana Orler, and I had the Nichols girl, Belinda Nichols. I had Tim Jinks in that show. I was trying to remember everybody else that I had in the show that year. It's maybe Johnny Dean. I believe, but Johnny Dean was in that show. I believe he was. But it was just, and also another boy that was in there that played the Arlecchino or whatever. And I think of his name. He's a small boy, but I'll think of it after a while probably. But he was just wonderful. The play was just a super play. It really was.
And how did it place in state?
We placed third in state.
And that wasn't bad for the first time.
No, it wasn't, because I was shocked, truthfully, because there were two shows there that I'd state that I thought was just absolutely incredible, because I got to see them all. And Snyder's play, The Tempest, one of the finest one-act plays at State I have ever seen in my life. And then Gregory Portland with Jerry Worsham directed the one from Snyder, and then Charlotte Brown from Gregory Portland's her play was just wonderful. And the play that won was the weakest of the 8 shows. I was so shocked.
I think that you need to explain about the selection of plays. It's one judge.
There's one judge that judges the plays on this one, and the play that won was a great cross-country race, and it's got 15 characters in it, and there's only 2 characters that do anything, and that's the turtle and the rabbit. And the rabbit does nothing but run and romp the whole play and talk. The rabbit and the turtle does nothing but just mosey around, finally gets beaten he wins the race, whatever, because the rabbit's too busy pestering everyone. And the other characters just say hip hip hurrah, and that's all. And you go, so what? And what was so sad about this one, the rabbit stayed in the audience, pestering the audience more than he stayed on stage.
And needless to say, you never directed that play.
No, I have never directed that play.
Really, it's UIL one-act play competition is really one person's opinion. Don't you see it?
Exactly. It's one person's opinion, and it's on that day. That if it's not a good day for them, you don't know what's going to happen. Even if it's a good day, you don't know what's going to happen. You're just putting yourself at the mercy of one person.
And how many times did you take your one-act plays to state?
13 times.
And how many times did you win first?
We won first in 83 and 85.
And what were those plays?
And the first one was the Royal Hunt of the Sun, the story of Pizarro and Atahualpa of the Inca Empire. And then in 85, we won a state with King Lear.
Now, tell me how many students you've taken to state. Do you know the total number?
Megan, when you look at all the speech kids that I've taken to state, then you add all 13 cast that's gone to state, you're looking at...
Would you say 1,000? 500?
I'd say probably when you're looking at 13 casts, then 13 times 5, 13 times 15. You're looking at 13 times, maybe to say 20, because you've got all your stage crews and all that, like I always have with all those huge stage crews that I carry and so on. So you have 13 times 20 there. That's going to run you, somewhere around 260 kids right there just with the plays. So I'd say probably in the neighborhood of between 400, 450 kids have been to state.
And you've had a lot of students who've placed first individually.
Yes, I have. At the state meet, in the speech events alone, I have had kids to win state 26. Like in the Lincoln Douglas debate, cross examination. That's a team debate. Poetry, prose, informative, persuasive. 26 state championships. The kids won 26 there, and then the play is 2 times. So that's 28 state championships.
Now, Kerry, has there ever been a student who's really become a professional actor?
Not that I know of. I know of some that have gone to, that have gone into tried to, and so on, and worked real hard at it. But I've never known of anyone that's really.
Really and truly, I have thought that some would make it. Jeff Hicks, I really thought he had a tremendous opportunity.
I did too. I really thought a lot of that Jeff had a great opportunity with that, but it was so good. But I think there were a lot of little things that just kind of went against him, and I think that really hurt.
Well, I remember one thing he was saying. He was taking tap dancing lessons, and we don't think about the overall of what the demands are. Ever, that you don't have to just, you can't be in one little strip. You got to be broad to hit it right. And also, Kerry, I think it's who you know too.
Oh, it's definitely who you know, because if you don't know somebody in New York, I'm sorry, or in Los Angeles or Chicago, wherever, you're not going to get in. And again, too, they're looking at people who can sing, who can dance, who can act, and people who can actually play musical instruments. And if they can't do these things, well, they're not interested in them. And many people think, well, like Bob Hope, they don't ever realize, of course, some people, young people may not know who in the world Bob Hope is, but we do, because when that man dies, we'll have a 30-day national holiday probably.
Well, I hope so.
I do too. But anyway, but you'd look at him. How did he get started? In singing and dancing and playing musical instruments. Those are things people never realized. He's one of the greatest dancers I guess, in vaudeville.
Kerry, do you remember the first play that you ever saw in your life?
That would be difficult. But I believe the first play that oh goodness, I know when I was in elementary school, I was in several little plays and so on. But I think the first play that I ever saw was when I was in that I saw on the college stage was when I was in about the 6th or 7th grade, and I went to WT and I saw the play. Oh my mind's going away from me now. But it's it's the Thornton. It's the Thornton, Our Town, Thornton Wilder.
Was there a day or a time or an era in your life that you said, I want to direct, I want to be a teacher, or did it just come great?
I think that being in high school, around the teachers that I was around, I think that had definitely had something to do with it there. And I knew, and once I went into college, when I enrolled right straight into teaching, and that's what I was going to be, a speech and theater teacher. But for directing plays, Megan, I don't think that it really dawned on me the work is going to take and what I needed to know until I was in about my 3rd or 4th year of teaching school. I mean, I'm talking about a greenhorn. Now, I was one.
I second that. Kerry, did you, really, how did you become a competitor? If anybody is a competitor, you are for a good reason, because it makes you better. But, how did you acquire that quality in your life?
I think when you go back to this
technical difficulty, Kerry, how did you become a competitor?
Megan, I think the competitiveness started when I would go to tournaments and I would see how well the other students were doing and my students how well they were not doing. And so, but the first year that I taught school, the very first year, and I had debate teams, I did not know a thing about coaching debate. And so I had a real good friend at Amarillo High School, Rose Powell, and I took my debaters up there every weekend for the first 9 weeks of school on Saturday morning from 9 to 12, and we worked with Amarillo High School's debate team. And I think that really instilled the competitiveness of what you needed to do. And I've always wanted, it's not so much winning for myself. I mean, winning for myself is not what I wanted. I wanted it for the kids so that they could be able to be successful. Competition to me is success. And if you don't, and we live in a world of competition. People to go out and get a job. It's competition. Who's going to get that job? And people don't understand it. You have 30, 40 other people trying out, maybe 100 for that same job. And I wanted my students to know that. And so that's why and as the years went on, I just pushed and pushed and pushed the kids and tried to find the best things that I knew how to, so they could do better.
What was your first successful debate team as far as winning?
That was in 1963 when Noned Bovell and Shirley Smallwood, Noned Bovell and, Shirley Smallwood, was that it? No, I believe. And they went to state and won state that year. Then they won the state championship. And then,
so that probably was the first place in state in anything.
No,
did you?
it's Karen Jones.
Oh, really?
She won the state championship in persuasive speaking in '62.
Well, speaking of Karen, do you know how many PhDs are among your former students?
Oh,
don't count me. I know I say I got it.
Oh, goodness. Megan, that's going to be hard because, it's amazing how many students of mine that, especially when I go back and look at students who have been, especially that were introduced to debate. Oh, it's amazing how many of those debaters. I know about 4 or 5 years ago, I just looked through the annuals and just looked at things, and I think there's about 98% who are college graduates, and of that 98%, probably, I'd say at least 60% have their doctorates. Really? That's just in the debate alone.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing how many people out there with doctorates.
Can you share with us, since you have announced that you were retiring, any letters or notes that you got that you just were sort of surprised about or really thrilled your heart? You hadn't thought of somebody in a long time?
Now this is something that's fun. But anyway, John Gully and I were just talking about Catherine West. I don't know if you remember, Catherine is absolutely the funniest thing I think I've ever taught, one of the funniest people I've ever taught. But years ago, this is a story that everybody on television that's watching this might enjoy, but we had to write a constitution. and so... And so Catherine and her group of kids, they decided that they would write a constitution for the Wazoo Society. And what it was is the ones could be members who had the widest rear ends. Can you believe? And those girls, they would go down the hall with measuring tapes. And so the principal never knew what they were up to. No, never. And the kids they'd go down the hall with their backs up against the wall, and at the end of the 6 weeks, they would go down and put an announcement on the announcement and say the Wazoo King and Queen of the Month are, and you would hear these blood-curdling screams come from down the hall. And she was the funniest thing, and I got a letter from her.
Where does she live?
She lives right across, they're in Portland, Oregon. You cross the bridge, the Columbia River, and you go across into the state of Washington in Portland. And she lives over there in Olympia, right across she just lives, or whatever the name of the town is, right across the bridge there. She lives right there. And Weston and I stayed there, Weston Price. Now, last summer, we stayed within 7 miles of her house, and we didn't know it. Ironic.
She lived out, she lived out at Pleasant Valley, and I think John and Hazel were her parents.
Yes, that's true.
She had a couple of brothers.
Yeah, James now, she said that James still lived in this area, but I haven't seen him. Now, James was the funniest of all of them with that Volkswagen that they used to drive up and down the street and turn a 180-degree turn right in the middle of the highway. Everybody would almost faint.
The kids have always been welcome at your home after you got one. When you came here, you didn't have a home. You lived with who?
Well, the first year, let's see, I started off with Mrs. Ivy, which is one of the Wagnans, and then of course, and this is terrible. I know. One morning I got up to go to school, and she wasn't there, and I found and so I went ahead and got ready and went to school and everything, and someone phoned me about 10 o'clock, and she'd passed away during the night, and I like to have it was shocking. I just couldn't teach school the rest of the day. It was horrible. And then I moved in with Mona Wagnon, that is June and Joe Mack Wagnon's mother, and I lived with her for about It's on 8th Street.
200 block.
Yeah, down there where Mrs. Carpenter lived, and Betty Jo, and I think she passed away not long ago. And then I stayed with her, and Mrs. Duke, her mother was there at that time. And then I moved up into her little garage apartment. Then after that for a year, and then after that, well, Paul Durham and I moved in together, and then Liesl, goodness gracious, I think we had about a 4-bedroom house, and I think Liesl and Bill and myself, and I don't know who all lived together there and so on. And Bill had his music lessons there too, and I went, oh no. And then I lived over with Elizabeth Harden for about 10 or 11 years. Oh, it was a wonderful time living over with Elizabeth.
Yeah, she loved you.
I tell you what, she was the first school teacher in Bailey County, I think. And she said she taught 1 year, and she knew it wasn't that, and she went back to school and got her accounting degree and moved down to, where was it, down by Burke Burnett, Electra, somewhere down in there, down in that area by Wichita Falls. And then as she worked there until the war started, then she moved to California. Then she came back here and went to work for the Methodist. No, I think she worked for a lawyer or the court system.
Judge Tate, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or somewhere in the courthouse, and then to the Methodist Church. And then you got married. Now, tell us about your courtship and how you sort of eyed that young Cassie, Pat Cassie. And she'd moved to town with Tri-County Savings and Loan, and was the secretary there. And so, how did you?
Well, we were with this years ago. We had the Business Activities Committee, and so Harvey Bass and Olin Burroughs and you had that group. And down at the bank, we had Harmon Elliott. All those men, they were all on there and so on. And they were always pestering Pat and myself to get together and so on. And she was a secretary of that one, and so I was on their board of directors, and so we'd work together, and I did, and that just, we first started out that way, and it just working together, and that's all. And then finally in about 1970, well, we started going together then, and then we got married in 72.
Where did you all marry?
We married at at Royce and Pat Clay's house with Church of Christ minister and his wife, and then we had Jeanette and Waylon Etheridge were there, and it's just a small wedding.
Oh, and we should tell about really how you got to Muleshoe. Waylon.
Well, Waylon is the one that sent my application for me, and I didn't even know he had done this and applied, but I'm glad he did, because I'd already looked at 3 other schools, and I did not like the 3 other schools the way they were, what they had said to me at all. And
Waylon was a friend from WT.
Oh, yes.
But he was a Muleshoe.
Yes, and we were roommates.
Now, when you graduated, did Waylon come right back to Muleshoe?
No, Waylon, he was a year behind me, and he taught his first 2 years in Freona.
I see.
And then he came to Muleshoe then.
And then later, he, after teaching, he became the principal.
Yeah, he became the principal here at junior high, then he moved to high school. Mm-hmm.
He was really good.
Oh, he was a wonderful principal.
Left Muleshoe High School in about 90.
Something like that, somewhere around there. I know he had finished his. Well, it may have been maybe 88, 87, 88, because I know after he finished his 30 years, well, he retired, and then he went into the job that he has now.
Late 80s then. And so you've lived all your married life here, and I do hope you're not going to tell me that now you're retired, you're leaving. No.
Well, Pat, now we haven't even discussed anything like that. Really, truly, I don't know what I would do if I were to leave, because, I look at things, my dentist is here, my doctor's here, and, everybody's here.
Families.
My family's here.
All your
that's right. My church family's here, all of it. And if I moved away, I'd have to start all over again. When you're in a place for 41 years, why do you want to just pick up and move away?
It's home.
Yes, it is home.
And Pat has been so supportive.
Listen, people just don't know how supportive she's an incredible wife. I mean, she's the sweetest thing you ever dreamed of.
Now, is she going to go to New York City with you?
I certainly hope so. I'm planning on her going.
That's good. And some of your former students and their parents and your friends got together and made up a little pot and just decided that you should go.
That's right, and I think you were one of them that helped them put it together, Megan, and I appreciate you so much.
Well, Drusilla and Terry Hutton certainly have been the big supporters in this too, and we all just had the same idea really, and have had it for many years, thinking, well, if he ever does make it to retirement, he has to go to the Big Apple. And you've never been to Broadway?
No, I haven't. I've seen many Broadway shows, but I've never been to New York to see them.
Well, how do you think you'll feel, Kerry?
I think it'll really be a great experience.
You know, I finally got to go myself in about 96, and I just couldn't believe I was there. And, you know, they really say that, you know, you pinch yourself. I really did. And it was just fantastic. I said, this is it. This is Broadway. I'm here. A little old country bumpkin is getting to sit here and buy this great big ticket and watch this fantastic musical. Anything that you specifically wants to see, or do you really know?
Well, I'd like to see the producers. That's one thing. And another, if the Music Man is still on, I want to see the Music Man, because Terry Hutton has told me that it is just incredible. He said it is. He really enjoys that one. And he and Drusilla, they talk with me about all these things. And of course, what's so good is that Randy Williams, one of my former students, that graduated, I believe it's 74, 75. I can't remember which year, but he's a concierge officer at the Marriott, and that's where I guess I'll be staying. And so he is the one that gets all the tickets, the tours. He'll put everything together for me. I know it. And Randy's, I believe twice he's been named throughout the entire Marriott Corporation as the Employee of the Year twice for that corporation.
Randy Wheat.
And he's born and raised here in Muleshoe.
But you know, a lot of your former students are up there. Let's see, who else?
Let's see, Jeannie Cox is there, and let's see, and then we have Jeff Hicks. I guess still lives there.
Yes.
He's still there, and then I was just trying to think of some of the others that might be there. I don't.
Do you think that Karen Jones has a brother who lives out from Manhattan and Ransom?
Ransom now, I don't know. You know, I talked several years when they had in 67, I guess it was 97, or I don't know when it was, but that I was with them, or the year maybe before that, maybe many years before that, I saw Ransom, and I was thinking they lived in Connecticut.
Oh, really? But I thought he really commuted.
Well, he does. He commutes every day. He comes and goes for Maine, and he works at the stock exchange.
And Mason Conklin has recently moved to New York.
Yeah, that's what Jenny Cox was telling me, and that maybe I'll get to see them while I'm up there.
We could have a reunion.
That's exactly right. That's true.
Well, Kerry, we want to hear about your trip when you return.
Well, I'll be glad to do it.
And I think the Kerry Moore High School auditorium at MHS is so fitting. And my goodness, if that auditorium could talk, what would it say?
Oh, that's something I don't know. I just hope it says, just looking at it, I hope the kids have learned. I mean, that they have learned what theater's all about and communications, what it's all about.
There's one thing I'm not going to let you get by without talking about before you go. You've got a nickname, and you've used some weird sounds and some weird impressions. How did all of that come about?
Megan, the way that all that came about, now, of course, the word goat, that when they say the greatest, what is it, greatest of all times or whatever it is, great, but that's I don't know if that's how that all got started or not. But to me, when I would drive the school bus and at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd have to keep myself awake. And I was always, honking at jackrabbits. They'd be on the side of the road or do something, and I'd make these sounds and whatever. And that's how it all came about and so on. And the kids, it just keep myself awake and keep myself busy and so on. And, of course, when I'd get tired, I'd go, man, or something like that in class. And it's amazing. The kids never look up or anything. Every once in a while, one of them will go, man, back or something. But they just keep right on working. That doesn't surprise them.
Well, you all go to have a wonderful retirement.
Yeah. Oh, do you remember that little deal that we used to have with standing up and doing that with Nonnie Taylor and all that group? We would all have our foot stuck one way and the other, and we'd do all this and have this like a secret club that we would have.
I remember this.
We had more fun with that, and we wouldn't tell anybody what the secret code, what it meant to be. Of course, it meant nothing, but we just had them all buffaloed about that.
Well, I tell you, all these 41 years, they mean a lot more than nothing. They mean a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun, too.
It's a lot of fun.
And we are so thrilled that Kerry Moore chose to come to Muleshoe in 1960, and he chose to stay all these years and to really give so much of himself to so many of you.